Here we go. Thank you all so much for being here tonight. My name is Marguerite Green, and you are at the first of an 8-part series that is part of our Beginning Farmer and Rancher Development Program series in partnership with Sprout NOLA and Recirculating Farms Coalition, or Recirculating Farms. It is a USDA program. So the FRDP programs are programs that were granted by the Farm Bill in order to help us train up the next generation of farmers. We have so many people who are interested in becoming farmers right now, and it's a phenomenal and really heartening thing to see. And what you're probably feeling yourself right now is that you need help and direction in whatever the next step of that is. And so with that in mind, we are here to assist you in that. And it's really cool that the USDA does offer this option for people to train in their own communities, rather than imagining that we can perfectly train the whole country from one centralized office. So we're really excited to be participants in this program. The structure of the classes are going to be that we have 8 weeks of classes. They're alternating lecture classes, which this is one of, as well as on-farm classes. Sophie, I don't want to put you on the spot, but would you like to say anything about the Google Classroom situation?
Sure. So the Google Classroom can be used for supplemental material, and that's where we'll be posting our videos after these sessions. So this recorded video would go up in there, and it can also offer a forum for you guys to post any concerns or anything. While you could reach out to us directly, it's a cohort of sorts, so maybe other people could field your concerns. Yeah, but you'll have access to the class drive without the classroom, but it's just a more cohesive place to meet.
Wonderful, thank you so much. And I'm going to pop in and out of that slideshow occasionally just to check that we don't have anyone in the waiting room who is waiting on us. So apologies for that, it's not perfectly seamless, but we're all living with a lot of technical difficulties these days, I suppose. So the partner organizations represented here, like I said, are Recirculating Farms Coalition and Sprout NOLA. I'll give a quick blurb about what Sprout NOLA does, and then pass it to RFC as well for them to talk a little bit about what they do within the context of this program, but then also larger, because both organizations are here to train and develop farmers in New Orleans, greater New Orleans area. And so hopefully a lot of what you take away from this program is the resources that exist to help support you. And so Sprout NOLA is a gardener and farmer technical assistance and training organization. So we hang out kind of in the whole southeast region of the state, but we are really hyper-focused on New Orleans. We support farmers in numerous ways. We do networking amongst farmers. We work on trainings for already, pre-professional farmers as well as already operating farmers. And then we offer a host of services, technical assistance on applications. We offer, we're currently about to offer a race and racism training for farmers here in the food system that's actually facilitated by Soulfire Farms out of New York. And then we also do a lot of gardener technical assistance and support. So one of the things that you're gonna be learning about tonight is that difference between farming and gardening. And hopefully we can be here to serve a lot of your needs in between, whatever camp that you decide to go into. Would someone from RFC like to tell us a little bit about what y'all do?
Sure, I'll jump in. Hey everybody, this is Marianne Cafone. I'm the Executive Director for Circulating Farms Coalition. We're a national nonprofit organization that works in innovative agriculture. And so primarily we focus on hydroponics, aquaponics, and land-based aquaculture. So meaning we do a lot of cooperative work between raising fish and plants. We are also involved in more traditional agriculture, raised garden beds, in-ground growing. We try and do some demonstrations for the community in a variety of different agriculture methods. We work in training, just like Sprout NOLA does, and we do that in partnership with them and others. And we also do policy advocacy work at the local, regional, and federal level. And we do a lot of legal support on things like leasing and insurance and other legal matters that come up for growers. We run a weekly community fresh food garden bag with Top Box Foods. And so we aggregate food from other local growers and get it out to the community at an affordable price.
Awesome. Absolutely, totally on brand. My Roomba started. So excuse me for running away for a second and telling it to quiet down. That spurred me a little bit, Marianne, to remember to say that as people are approaching the idea of farming and gardening, one of the other programs that Sprout offers is that we do have a weekly farmers market called the Refresh Farmers Market, where RFC does signups for that fresh food bag, that fresh local food bag that they were talking about, that Marianne was mentioning. And that farmers market is really an incubator farmers market to help new and beginning farmers decide really where they fit into the food system and decide if they want to go further and graduate to bigger markets, or if they want to stay where they're at, which we love and respect as well. So quickly, some other organizations to be aware of, all partner organizations of both RFC and Sprout, LSU Ag Extension, so Louisiana State University, and all land-grant universities have programs that are called extension programs. That means that the school itself is obviously training students in what they're there to do, but extension services that are offered through land-grant universities are meant to be the bridge between the community and the institution. And so they are legally required, all land-grant universities are legally required to have extension offices, and they're a wealth of knowledge and resources. Our extension agent here for our parish, Orleans, is Anna Timmerman, as well as Joe Willis and Chris Dunway. They are phenomenal and a host of knowledge. So please check them out. We'd be happy to connect anyone with them. But it's also very easily searchable on the LSU Ag website. Same with Southern University. They have a lovely extension department. They do operate in their extension capacity a lot more in surrounding parishes, not as much here in Orleans Parish, but Southern has awesome programs. They have a beginning farmer and rancher development program as well, so that's definitely something to check out. The Crescent City Farmers Market, which is also known as Market Umbrella, that's their umbrella organization, does a lot of wraparound services for farmers who are coming into markets. So they're developing the vendors that are going to be at their markets, and we partner a lot with them in making sure that there are lots of programs to help people figure out where they get in, where they fit in. Additionally, we have here in New Orleans, the Greater New Orleans Growers Alliance. So Michael, who's lurking on here with RFC, and myself are both co-organizers of that association, and it is just a big old group of gardeners, farmers, edible landscapers, forestry people, native plant people. It's anyone who's pre-professional with a desire to be professional in some sort of agricultural industry. And it's a really vibrant listserv. And if you are looking to get serious about growing food or flowers, herbs, animals, any of that stuff here in the city or in surrounding areas in the sort of Greater New Orleans area, we do encourage you to join that listserv. That is gnoga.org to sign up, and we will we'll usher you in. And then lastly, we do have a craft network here in Louisiana. CRAFT, there's so many acronyms in agriculture, y'all. CRAFT stands for Collaborative Regional Alliance of Farmer Trainings, and so that's a network of farmer-to-farmer training. So it is a farmer-run network of peer-to-peer, like active on-farm training work. That's a really phenomenal resource. It is limited to folks that are actively growing for market, but it's a really awesome way and place to get, to kind of cut your teeth. And if people are finding apprenticeships on farms, it is a program that is absolutely for them to learn new skills and learn how to use new machinery. So we did all of that, the housekeeping and the teacher introductions. I clearly got ahead of myself. So I want to frame this class for everyone. First of all, I find myself often playing the role in our sort of technical assistant, like food system world here in New Orleans of a heartbreaker, which means that I like to talk about the realities of farming and gardening a lot. And so sometimes people need a palate cleanser after I kind of come in and talk about the hard truth. But really, at the end of the day, this is an absolutely phenomenal field to be in. Agriculture is, you know, my singular passion. I hope it's your passion. I hope it's not your singular passion, but it's a really amazing field to be in, and no puns intended there. And we do absolutely need more farmers. We are in a critical place here in America where the average age of the American farmer is in their 60s. There's going to be a 2/3 land transition in this country in the next decade. We have to be training up new farmers, but we don't do anyone any favors if we don't talk about what that work looks like and help people prepare for the reality of it, because there are so many people that are needed for a local food system to tick. There are people that are needed on the gardening side. There are people that are needed as eaters and customers. There are people who are needed from every direction. And, you know, I think that everyone can, again, get in where they fit in. And so defining the difference is not about one thing being better than the other. It's just about creating that mental space. So a farmer's role in the local food system is to grow that local produce for animals, be like honey, flowers, any of those things, to learn and teach with other farmers and partner organizations, to create a robust local food system that moves us towards a strong local economy, and green space management and local engagement with food. So then what is a gardener's role in the food system? And it's to grow local produce, to learn and teach with other gardeners and partner organizations, to create a robust food system that moves us towards a strong local economy, and green space management and local engagement with food. They're completely the same. So what is the difference? The difference between running a farm and a garden is that the farm is a need to run a solvent business that supports you as a worker and doesn't cut corners in your protection of the earth and other workers. And so oftentimes when we start from a place of being a gardener and we try to make everything work just so and have the schedule that we want and make the finances that we want and make the environmental decisions that we want and the labor decisions that we want, if we're not prepared, there is a house of cards that can come tumbling down on top of you. And to give you a little bit of background in why I am the person that is teaching this class, I went to LSU for agriculture and I studied the actual production of agriculture. I studied what's called alericulture. It's vegetable production. And I did not focus on the business side of agriculture very much. I focused on the side that made me happy, which was production. It was getting out there and identifying bugs. It was harvesting and going to market. It was all the things that made my heart sing about agriculture. And then I got out of college and I didn't have land and I didn't have capital and I didn't have a business plan, or I didn't have a good business plan. I reread my 10-year-old business plan today to see if there was anything in there to share with y'all. And there was not. It was a wasteland. So I got out there and I said, I'm going to start a farm, but I want to live in the city and I want to be near all my friends and I don't want to work myself to death and I want to be able to service my student loan debts. And so I started a farm on 1/10 of an acre with a credit card. And cut to 2 years later and I was incredibly burned out and realized that I couldn't make that system work at all, no matter how hard I tried. And when I realized that that was not a personal failing, it was a preparation failing, and it was essentially a lot of the things that are going on with our food system, the grit was not enough. The really like trying to white knuckle my way through it was not enough. That is when I got into the kind of training and development of farmers and wanting to build a stronger local food system with all of our partners and work towards something that's more sustainable for all of us. So I still farm at night, which is something I'll mention to you all because it's not a very sustainable thing to do. And yeah, just that's a little background here. I'm going to pop out and make sure we don't have anybody in that waiting room. We do. Great. Welcome. Okay, back into it. So, what is sustainable farming and how is it different from just environmentalism? Farming that doesn't negatively impact the earth through inputs, behaviors, and stewardship can be defined as sustainable farming. Farming that keeps the quality of the earth sustained, right? But it should also be defined as farming in a way where the person who is doing the farming can continue doing it for their life. So if you're not making enough money to live, if you're not making enough money to pay your bills, you can't keep doing it for life. If you are hurting your body, you can't keep doing it for life. If you are abusing your labor and your friends and your workers, you can't keep doing that for life. Or you can, but you'll be very lonely, and a lot of people will be really mad at you. So you shouldn't. And so ideally, we want to move towards sustainable farming for both the person and the earth. And then we want to take that further eventually. This is the big challenge that we're all facing together. We're all going to work on it together, okay? You're now committed to doing this with us in whatever role you find. We want to move towards regenerative farming for both people and the earth. We want to create a system of harmony where we are actually rebuilding the earth's topsoil. We are actually capturing carbon. We are actually doing things that bring biodiversity back to our farms. And we are finding and making jobs that sustain human beings and are replenishing and nourishing to their souls. So all of the hard stuff that I'm going to tell you about farming, there's a big caveat on it, which is that it is the way that things are often or are now, and there is a bigger fight to be made and a bigger thing to be part of together in reforming how our food system looks. So the purpose behind decision making for are you a farmer or are you a gardener? Are you here for business or pleasure, as I put it here, is that we want to make sure that you are finding the right space for yourself so that you can have that sustainable lifestyle for yourself. So there's been a huge COVID-19 uptick in interest in farming. And I personally think that that might have a lot to do with the fact that we had a moment where it felt like maybe our supply chain wasn't going to be able to handle the stresses that we were putting on it as we are currently going through this pandemic. And I think that it is a golden moment for the food system because a lot of people have re-engaged with the idea of growing their own food, and there is nothing but good that will come of that one thing. So that is the tiny silver lining, is that we are all kind of waking up and starting to look at how our food is produced and how land is used and what our own skills to be part of that are. So you can farm or you can garden, and it can be for pleasure and pocket change, or it can be a business. But it does, unfortunately, have to be one or the other. Finding yourself in the middle ground of that will lead to lack of clarity in finances and a whole lot of stress. It is good for your mental health to decide which one it is and then commit to that. And you can transition from one to the other at any time. I talk to farmers at our market all the time who I'll say like, how you doing today? And they're like, you know what? I think I might just want to go become a gardener again. Or I'll talk to gardeners all the time and they're like, I'm ready to do this. I'm ready to become a farmer. So it is a spectrum in the sense that both sides are equal and balanced and important, but we don't want you in the middle of it, right? We want a clear decision about which direction you want to go so that you can plan towards that. And there will be stuff in this class series for everyone, but this decision-making part is crucial in your journey of how you want to take this information in and apply it to your own life. So this is a question that I get asked all the time, specifically at parties, weirdly enough, is that people come up to me, they hear that I was a farmer, am a farmer, train farmers, and they say, what can I grow on an acre or two that won't take much time and will make me a lot of money? And I think that maybe those people just have not been reading all of those scary articles that always come out about like the food system is broken. Because I'm always like, what do you mean? What can you grow on an acre or two that won't take much time and it will make you a lot of money? If that was a thing, then we're all doing this wrong. And people who grow food will be super duper rich. So the answer is nothing, big zero. There is nothing that you can grow that is going to take very little space or a moderate amount of space, very little time, and is going to make you a bunch of money. That's just not how it works. A lot of the time people ask me like, how is that possible? I hear all this stuff about super rich farmers with lots of land, but a lot of those situations are actually coming out of people using tax codes or leveraging debt. So the production of food and even the production of commodities is not something that's an incredibly profitable venture. And so the ways that people are finding to accrue wealth in land and in agriculture are not related to that production, and they're not related to that labor. They're a totally separate thing that we are not here to teach you about. So the reality of part-time farming to make a profit, which is essentially that question of like, how do I do this with not very much time? Fruit and nut crops take a lot of land because you have to have, you know, that economy of scale. You have to have a sizable harvest. They take an upfront investment. So you have to find and purchase the land, and you have to find and purchase stock for tree crops. And then in a substantial amount of time to get to market. So maybe you have one big hazelnut harvest every year. You still have to figure out where all those hazelnuts go, which means creating relationships with people in the value chain, in the food chain, and keeping those relationships up throughout the year. And the most simple relationships are going to be direct wholesale relationships, meaning that you have a big old crop and 1, 2, 10 people buy it at a wholesale price, and you don't have a lot more to do with it. That is going to be the lowest value for the crop that you're growing. So the simplest relationships get you the least amount of money. The most complex relationships get you the most amount of money. So there's a time and profit balance that's happening there. Vegetable crops take a pretty good amount of land, lots and lots of time growing, and a lot of time getting to market. Because again, you're going to have that situation of wholesale prices are lower. You're going to be getting less for what you grow. But the relationship is easier. Then you have bees. Bees take a good amount of time to process and set up, but a high skill level and a lot of time marketing. Bees are a really wonderful specialty crop, and they do actually have a high profit margin, and a lot of people are able to fit bees into their lives because you can have hives on lots of different properties. So you'll see throughout this conversation tonight, well, right now I'm just talking at you, but eventually we'll have a conversation. You'll see throughout this talk tonight that there are exceptions. So we don't create rules because out of nowhere, right? The exception creates the rule. And these are a little bit off, but so livestock takes a moderate amount of time, but a ton of land and a lot of marketing and business acumen. So the process of getting animal products to market is often very regulatory. There's a lot of red tape, and there's a lot of interpretation of the law and relationship building. So for instance, one of the cattle farmers that we know just recently had to open up their own processing facility because the process of slaughtering meat and preparing it for market is actually very difficult and highly regulated. And to even have meat cross state lines means that you have to be in a different facility for processing than you would be if your meat was sold in the state, because you have federal slaughter and then you have state level slaughter. And so if you want to bring your meat to Mississippi, and there's a whole thing. So there is a lot of technical detail that goes into livestock production. So it's not a set it and forget it. Also, those animals always have to have their food, and they always have to have their water. So it's not a low buy-in. And then commodity crops, which we do not teach about here, but just to make sure that they're kind of as part of this fabric of things that people grow. Commodity crops take a lot of time, but it is not a lot of direct hands in the dirt work, but it is a huge annual investment. So commodity crops are made possible by leveraging debt from the previous year in order to purchase seed and purchase equipment. And then they require tons of land. So again, that economy of scale is in full effect. You can't grow an acre of GMO soybeans and make a profit, because reasonably you can't really grow a couple hundred acres of GMO soybeans and make a profit. So it's a whole nother ball game. I'm gonna check that waiting room real quick. We are all good. Hopefully nobody got turned away. Great. So I wanted to walk y'all through a quick example. And we do have a business planning class that is part of this series, but this is to get some of those realities out of the way so that we're dealing with real numbers and helping you kind of move yourself towards whether or not you want to write a business plan or you want to stay a gardener right now. So I used chickens, for example, because a lot of people have yard eggs that they sell, and that's a really fun and wonderful hobby. So if one chicken lays about 300 eggs a year after a while, right? So there's going to be a time when you have a pullet and they're not laying eggs yet. So you have 25 dozen eggs coming out of a bird every year. I shouldn't have said coming out of a bird. You have 25 dozen eggs from a bird per year. And right now the market can support about $5 to $7 of retail sales of eggs. So some markets, you know, eggs will not sell if they're above $5. Some markets, they'll fly off the shelves for $7. So that gets back to that thing of like marketing decisions are going to be part of this whole picture. So let's say at 6, I kind of cut the middle. We have $150 per bird per year of pure profit that is, or not pure profit, of income coming in from each bird. So then let's say to get those 25 dozen eggs in a carton, it's $8 a year. We've got 22 in feed, 5 in water, 5 in medical. And then I did, you know, an evaluation of your water and your feeder saying maybe it costs a couple $100 up front, but over the years, let's say it's $5 a year for that infrastructure. And then we get down to about $100 coming in from a bird every year. But then you have to factor in the land, if you own the land, or if you're going to have to rent the land or buy the land. Maybe it's your own house. That's great. The labor. So your time is valuable. And that is one of the things that I really want people to walk away understanding, is that if you do something for 40 hours, and you make $40, you made $1 an hour, because the time that you spent doing that thing could be spent reading a book. It could be spent like getting to know your kids better. It could be spent planting a flower in your front yard that you wanted. So just because you do something and there is profit at the end doesn't mean that you are actually coming out on top. And I really like to remind people of that, because we all deserve that balance in life. And I think that with the current situation and how much we're all hustling, it is very easy to forget that the time that we're not on someone else's clock is ours. And we are only given, you know, the only thing we're ever promised are those hours. And so we have to do with them what makes us happy and what makes us safe. And so your labor is not nothing. I anecdotally will say I had this conversation with a really small scale farmer the other day. It's a husband and wife who farm. And I was like, you guys, you could be spending this time together watching a TV show. And they both turned to each other and they were like, we don't want to spend that time together. We want to spend that time farming. And that's valid. Like, if this is what you love, that's great. But just remember that your time is sacred. Then you have market fees if you're going to market, and then you have to build your coop. And then there are unforeseen circumstances. So a dog could get in and kill all your chickens. A hawk could get in and kill all your chickens. They could have Marek's disease and they could all die. So all of this comes into account when you're trying to think about how much money you could make having eggs on your urban farm. So a small chicken operation is more likely to lose money than it is to make money. And before we jumped on, I was like, you know, I should actually really write out the math of this to illustrate it. So you'll get a lot more of these terms when we're talking about that business planning, but you know, a profit margin is the amount that you're going to have. Basically, it's the revenue remaining after your operating expenses are removed. And so a 10% profit margin, meaning you are making a 10% return on the investment that you're doing, is considered not good, not bad, but average. So we'll work off that 10% profit margin and say, if you need to make $50,000 a year to live, which, you know, it's a funny world, because I'm sure some people in this class will be like, $50,000 is the most money I've ever heard of. And some people will be like, my family can't live off of $50,000. So, you know, it takes all types, like that might be enough. So if you need to make $50,000 to live a year and you have 10% profit margin on these eggs, then that means you would need to make $500,000 a year with this chicken business in order to have that 10% profit margin equal $50,000. And I broke that down a little bit further. So that is 100,000 cartons of eggs right, at $5 each. So you would have to sell 100,000 cartons of eggs at $5 a piece in order to make that $500,000. And if your birds are laying 25 dozen eggs a year, that's 4,000 birds. And let's say, you know, on a small scale, you can have a bird every 10 feet, but on a large scale, that's a lot of manure. So then you probably would need, you know, 3 acres to raise that many birds, maybe even a lot more space if you want to do it right and you want to do it in a way that's respectful of the environment and runoff. So the big question is, if you want to raise chickens and offset that $22 a year in feed by selling eggs to your neighbors, should you do that in recycled cartons? Absolutely. That's a community food system. Not everything in our food system has to be scaled up, profitable business enterprises, but we want to make sure that people aren't secretly hemorrhaging money they're not realizing, and that their gardening bug or their farming bug is actually negatively impacting their finances instead of positively impacting their finances and their community. So I talked to you guys through all of this and talked down the idea of having a chicken business, but I've been keeping chickens for 10 years because I enjoy the process of keeping chickens. I enjoy the process of knowing where my eggs are coming from. I like them as pets. And I think a lot of people in here probably feel the same way. So not everything that we do needs to be a solvent business, but that's part of what we're trying to kind of suss out here tonight. Are there exceptions? Of course there are exceptions. There always are. But don't get sucked into the glamour. And this is a thing I find a lot, is that people will watch a lot of a YouTube video of a certain urban farmer. And I'm not naming one. I'm saying there are a ton out there. And I saw one the other day that was, you know, this man makes $100,000 a year by farming all the front yards in his neighborhood. On a bike, you know, and in the community that he's in, that might be something that the market can support. But that's not a scalable model, and it's not a model that you can necessarily just adapt onto your own neighborhood. So keeping those things in mind, it's really important to make sure that you're not just looking for these kind of glamorous exceptions and trying to make a huge life decision based off of them. Another thing I ask a lot is that people say, well, I saw this guy on a book tour and he said that he could do, you know, he could make $60,000 a year, Well, he's on a book tour. So there's a couple of things you can deduce from that. One, he's making money off a book tour. And two, he's the guy that was able to write the book on it. So you shouldn't assume that maybe that model is exactly scalable. And you will often see people who are selling classes, people who are selling workshop series online, and they're $600, $700, $800 to get into. And that is a very smart business decision for those people. And I'm not knocking it at all. There are some really amazing things to glean from those classes. And the fact of the matter is they are part of that farm's bottom line. So they're part of the way that that farm has diversified in order to make a profit. I feel like I'm probably talking kind of fast because I get passionate about this topic. So here are some of our common exceptions. People with family land or who already have land that they're not servicing debt on will always find much easier footing in farming. If your land is a box that you can check off, that is a huge capital investment that is out the window and you are starting not in the hole. So I oftentimes will take calls from people who are saying that they want to become farmers, and I'm ready to tell them, you know, this is maybe not for you, you don't have any experience, and they'll say, well, you know, I have 75 acres of land that was my grandfather's, and I'm immediately like, oh great, no, we should make you a farmer, you got to be a farmer, let's keep you a farmer. Because land is this huge piece, and it's really difficult to find affordable, good, fertile land within a reasonable drive of the city. So if you have land, that's great. We're already rocking and rolling. People with equipment and minimal financial needs will always have an easier time. So a lot of the time, folks already have farming equipment because it runs in the family, or because they moved onto a property and someone left something. any of those boxes that you can check ahead of time that you don't have to make the investment in are going to make it easier to become a farmer. People who have a spouse with enough income or some financial arrangement like retirement money, those are always going to be people that are better able to make it work. That's another thing is, you know, you'll see in our current food system, a lot of the folks who are really making a great go of farming, there will often be off-farm income. I would say reasonably 95% of the time there's off-farm income, or there is retirement at play or investment money at play. And I say that to make sure that, you know, as you're assessing your ability to run a farm, you're not holding yourself up to standards that are unachievable because there isn't off-farm income coming into your operation. And then finding high value niche crops with a market, that can happen, but you will need serious business chops to do that. So I hear about things often where people are like, I'm going to grow olives, or I'm going to farm snails or mushrooms. Like, those things exist. There are high value crops with a niche market that haven't been tapped. Absolutely. But you shouldn't just kind of close your eyes and pick off of something that you read, you know, on the internet. You need to really do that market research, and you need to figure out, is that crop kind of a flash in the pan, a trend, or is it something that's here to stay? I love anecdotes, so I'll say sunflowers. Flowers are a high value crop. Flowers have a great profit margin. I am a flower farmer. I do vegetables as well, but every year that I've turned a profit, it's been because of flowers. Sunflowers were a crop that in the 80s, a lot of flower farmers decided that they were going to take a big risk on flower farming and try to do this whole cropping of sunflowers, which were not a current cut flower at the time, and that they were going to work on market development to make sunflowers a marketable cut flower. And there was not a lot of backup from extension agencies in planting schedules or variety development with sunflowers because they thought it was a trend. And now here we are, you know, 20, 40 years later, like 35 years later. And sunflowers are, you know, a really safe, like a good strong stem sunflower is a really safe crop to grow because you can sell it through grocery stores, you can sell it at market, people love them, they bring joy. So niche crops are a thing, and they can be here to stay, and you can be part of a whole new crop being marketed. So then this brings me to the question of, I'm saying, you know, you got to have land, you got to have capital, you got to have family connections. Is that how it should be? I think that's an unanswerable question, but I do know that, you know, we, RFC and Sprout and all of our partner organizations, are working to remove the barriers to farming and make it something that is more equitable and make it something that more folks can access without having to have those things up front. That being said, it is a business, and any business does take a serious upfront investment, but I'm less sure of that argument if the access to capital and the access to land is so starkly different along lines of race and class. And so we do have a lot of work to do in the agriculture sector. And when I say a lot of work, I mean a lot of work to do in terms of making farming as a career something that is accessible to people who have the skill and the drive, because farming is one of those few careers where you can't just start on the ground floor. You can't work your way up to owning a farm. You either work on someone's farm or you own a farm. And so that means really the ability to jump into owning a farm is often just incredibly inequitable. And that's something that I think we should all be examining as eaters, as participants in a food system, and as people who are pursuing becoming farmers ourselves. There's a lot of power in bucking that and in saying, like, I'm going to make this work. And, you know, there are a lot of organizations that are here to try to help you dismantle that and to try to make it work. So I will say that, you know, both Sprout and RFC in doing these classes are working to make access to the resources to farm way more shared and way more available to people. And then that policy component that Marianne talked about is huge as well. So we do have to have big policy change on all the way up to the federal level in order to make farming something that is more feasible for more people, because we are definitely at a deficit of farmers. So when I was talking about niche crops, I like to use examples that I've heard from people before. So this is a real one that I've gotten. Someone said it's going to be a rooftop tea garden that hosts weddings, teaches compost classes, but it's also a floral studio. So these ideas where we have lots of different moving parts about how to make a farm profitable are really cool. And they're often so much more creative than I have the ability to be. And I'm like, my mind is blown by them. And I have seen some of them really take off and be these agribusinesses and agritourism industry components that are like really mind blowing and very cool. But it goes back to that thing of don't just look at, you know, a model that you saw in New York City. Like, make sure it works in your community and make sure you know what you're getting into. So it's going to be a rooftop garden. Where's the roof? You know, do you have a lease on that roof? Is it a 10-year lease on that roof to make sure that you have safe access to that space? What if you invest in that business and then the owner of that roof is like, I want that business. That's a great business. You got to have an airtight lease. What's the weight of the soil? I cannot tell you how many times rooftop gardens have been in the works, and then a structural engineer comes in and puts the kibosh on the whole rooftop garden. So it's going to be a tea garden. Is tea something that's getting folks in your community excited about? Are they loving to come out and buy tea? You know, what's the cost of that tea? And then another one that we see a lot is that people will have a business plan that requires that they teach for-profit classes, but oftentimes there are already free classes in the area. So, you know, are there free compost classes in your area, or is there another business already doing that? I think some of the best classes I've ever been to have been sliding scale paid classes from farmers that we work with. And I love a good paid class. And also, I do think that the ability to get people out and paying for a class is not as much of an earner as people often think it is. And then at the end, you know, but it's also a floral studio. So I said, how many people are working here? So if we cram everything together, we can't be good at everything, right? And we can't make everything land exactly. So focus on what you're good at, take that path of least resistance, and maybe start adding extra bells and whistles as you go, instead of starting with those bells and whistles. I'm gonna do a quick check on that waiting room. I think we're in good shape. And sorry, as the light changes in my room, I might get spookier, but we'll live. Okay, so if all of this business and profit talk is exhausting you and you're like, it is 6:45 on a Friday night, I just love to garden, I just want to grow food, why is she making me think about all of this? Then maybe you are a gardener, and that is a beautiful thing. And you should go outside and unwind in your garden with a little glass of wine and appreciate the beauty of nature, which is what I'm going to do after this class. But if all of this business and profit talk is making you super excited to get out a pen and paper and open up your bank account for your farm, then you might be ready to get farming. So you do need to, we can train for anything, right? Nobody is born a perfect, natural, good farmer. We have to work on these things. And we, like I said, we are here as organizations and we are here as people and as activists to try to make sure that farming as an industry isn't just something that people with capital and land are able to do, but you do have to want to do the hustle part of it. You do have to want to do the business part of it to run it as a business. And that is something that you can't teach. It's either a passion that you have or a passion that you don't have. And again, you can run it as a business and sell eggs to your neighbors, and that's great. That's absolutely beautiful. Not only is that great, I want more people to do that actively. and work to encourage more people to do that actively. And it can be a really great way to offset some of those costs of gardening. But where I get concerned is when people start stressing themselves out or quitting their day job. You would be surprised. We've had people quit their day jobs to sell eggs, and then they find out it's going to be a money suck, not a way to pay the bills. So the bottom line, start a business or don't. You get to decide how you organize your life, but I want you to have clear eyes going into that situation so that you know what you're getting into, and that if you're going to take out debt, if you're going to have debt, that you know what you're doing, and so that we don't end up in situations where, we don't end up in situations where people have serious debt or lose property, lose family land. That's a huge deal. That's a big piece of equity. There has been an immense and intentional history of Black land loss in this country, and the idea of people losing family land because they are not, really with clear eyes seeing what the business plan of starting a farm is heartbreaking, and it is something that we have to work actively to stop. So, and I promise we'll move into something other than me just talking in a second, but I compiled a list of the things that I wish I knew before I started farming, and that other people, all of the farmers that we work with can contribute to or did contribute to. So not every single one of them has to be a checked box. You don't have to know or accept every one of them, but it's just the wisdom of your peers. You need to spend at least 2 seasons on a working farm in your region. There's a big difference between doing the work and seeing the everyday change and the systems building of running a farm and popping in and out, right? So you need to really see that whole thing go to make sure that you get it in your brain, kind of how the season works. Train for it like another skilled profession. So CPAs don't just watch YouTube videos. If you're gonna do this, you gotta spend some time training and learning. We're all very connected to plants. It's a magic. We are animals, they are plants. It is magical. We have an unbreakable bond. And in order to turn that into a profession, there is gonna be a little bit extra time required. And so you can't just grow what you like, right? You have to grow what's gonna sell. And if that really breaks your heart, then maybe you're a gardener, because gardeners can grow whatever they want. And you can't grow a ton of things either. So the process of picking out your seeds for the year, if you're a gardener, is one of the most joyful processes. You open up a seed catalog and you see all this stuff, and you get a little of this and a little of that, and maybe your neighbor who's a gardener wants to go in on a seed order with you, and you end up with 50 things, right? But if you are a farmer, you don't get to end up with 50 things. You have to decide what variety works in your area and what sold well at market last year, and you have to drill down. You need to prove that the bells and whistles that you think might work will. So running a farmer's market at your farm, you got to make sure that people want to come to it, that farmers are committed to selling there if you decide to open it up. Hosting weddings at your farm, talk to other wedding venues, make sure that they are saying, yeah, we're turning clients away. There need to be more wedding venues. The next thing is don't buy cool stuff, and sometimes do. So some people don't buy anything because they're worried about money. And those people in starting a farm business probably need to loosen up the purse strings a little bit and make the real upfront investments so that there's a woman named Ellen Polishuk that some people might know, and she does farmer training. And I love a thing that she says, which is that you can have all of the different size baskets to bring to market, and they can stack in all these different ways and they can be adorable. But to run your farm in a way that doesn't make you crazy, you need baskets that stack together and go into a car, just like so. I'm thinking about one of the vendors at our farmer's market. She comes with the same bin every week, and her stuff is stacked, and she's got her samples, and everything is like clean and organized and just so, and all packs in and packs out. And I'm thinking of other times in my life where I've been like, I've got this sheet and it's floral and I'll lay it here, and there's the basket here. So invest in the good, clean, durable stuff that you need to really start a farm business. And then on the other side of that, don't go buy every cool tool that somebody tries to sell you. So you don't need, 6 different kinds of broad fork. You need one really good broad fork, if you need a broad fork at all. You probably, are gonna need a walk behind tractor, or maybe you're gonna be no-till, but you need to be able to understand what the equipment that you're gonna really like is and that you're gonna really use is. And you can do that by talking to other farmers who are running operations like the one you wanna run. You'll always be learning. I think that's pretty intuitive. You can't do it alone. I'm sorry, but you cannot do this alone. You got to do it with someone. It can be a partner, it can be a friend, it can be a business partner, but you cannot do it alone. And to separate your finances as early as you decide that you want to be a farmer and that you want to do this for a business, you need to separate your finances. Even if that's just a separate personal banking account because you don't have an LLC yet, just make sure that you're keeping a clear accounting, because one of the prime things about running a farm is that you have to take all the write-offs for all of the things that you are purchasing that are farm business related, because farming has such a low profit margin that those taxes really matter. It is not a part-time job, at least not for one person. It takes a long time to feel confident. An urban farm won't pay the bills as an urban farm. So it might pay the bills as a wedding venue, but it's not going to pay the bills as a working farm. And there's a reason farmers try to work alone. Profit margins are negative or slim. So farmers often are not able to hire apprentices. They're not able to hire labor because they're trying to keep their costs down so much. And I think a lot of people are curious as to why they can't find an on-farm job. It's because that profit margin is so slim that you can't really pay people a living wage unless you scale up. And then no exceptions. If it's a business, you have to run it like a business. And if it's not, you get to do whatever you want, which is the beautiful part of gardening. So I'm going to actually take us out real quick before we do that to a little bit of a breakout for everyone, because I think we've had a lot of talking. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to quick link you all in the chat. So I need everybody to look at the chat. We're going to go and quick do an assessment. You're going to each individually do an assessment, and then there's a little video in that. And the beauty of an assessment is that you are going to get to see kind of on paper where you are with your skills and decide what you want to start working on and what you want to start developing as a farmer or as a gardener. And it should pretty quickly give you an idea of if you're excited to learn all these new skills, or if you're not as excited to learn all of these new skills and you're kind of like, whoa, slow down. Well, I didn't ask you to, make a whole business assessment of me. At the end of it, there is a video about farm crops. And what I'm really looking for people to do is decide whether or not they like talking about growing things in this way. And I think if you like talking about growing things in this way, you should follow that. And you should, realize that maybe you're one of those people that has the bug and it's real and you want to be a farmer. And if all of this is a big turnoff, you should listen to that instinct too. So I'm going to stop my screen share and I'm going to drop this link into the chat. Here we go. And I will ask folks to just do a quick click through on this and meet us back here. I think it'll take about 18 minutes. So why don't we come right back to here? Keep your mics, your mics muted and your cameras off at 7:20, right before 7:20, 7:19. There you go. And we're still here if you have any questions or concerns or technical difficulties. Just chat. I'm just going to pop in here because we added a few people during the break. Right now, we are doing a self-assessment that is linked in the chat. If anyone's having any difficulty with that link, please let me know.
Hey folks, this is Marianne. I am looking for if somebody's on the phone. I see a phone number that is a 315 number. If you can hear me, can you either hit *9 to raise your hand or hit *6 to unmute and tell me your name?
Is it Rick Petrie?
Great, thanks very much. I wasn't sure if you were also online and just using the phone as a audio or if you were somebody separate. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to start just gently calling people back in. Don't have to come back just now, but no, we're about to tune back in. So at your pace. Okay. I'm hoping we're all back here by about now. I did want to create a little bit of space for a first round of questions because there's a lot of information going on in this PowerPoint, and we're going to be together for a total of 2 hours. So I don't want to make everybody hold everything they're thinking or feeling up until the very end. So what I'm going to do is, in order to kind of make it flow a little bit better, let's do if you could chat me with a question, and then I'll call on you if you have them. We might not have any, but I want to make sure there's space for it. Does anyone want to ask a question? Or even a comment, complaint, concern? Awesome. Okay. Looks like we're feeling okay. You can chime in at any time, actually, with questions in the chat. And that way, if I have a moment to answer them then, I'll answer them then. So what size do you think is reasonable in the city to farm to make money? Just got asked. So the answer to that is that it totally depends on what you're selling. I would say that it is very, very difficult to run a profitable farm operation growing vegetables on less than 2 acres. And that's going to be pretty intensively planted 2 acres. Now, I would ask our partners at RFC, because they do alternative ag, and that is not my wheelhouse. I'm an in-ground row person. What their answer to that is, because I think there is a very different answer, and that's why I think it's so cool that this class is collaboratively taught. Not this class, this class is a bunch of me heartbreaking, but this series is collaboratively taught because there is a whole world of above ground agriculture and aquaponics and aeroponics that is not my area of expertise. I will quickly ask, is there someone from the RFC team that would like to, so the answer for traditional vegetable agriculture is I would never go under 2 acres for a diversified vegetable operation. And is there someone from the RFC side that would like to answer that question for different forms of agriculture?
Sure. Hey, it's Marianne, everybody. So it depends. The answer is very, very clear here. It depends. And the reason I say that is because it matters what you're growing and whether you're doing it indoors or outside, and the design of your system. Recirculating farms can be done vertically, and that gives you almost endless growing space because you can layer the different levels, and so it's a lot depending on the size of your farm, but generally speaking, we say about 1/8 of an acre is able to make a significant amount of money because it is super intensive growing. Our one grow bed that's 4 feet by about 25 feet gave us about 25 pounds of vegetables a week on a regular basis. So that's just one grow bed.
Awesome. So we had another question from Devin. How can I start researching what's selling in my area? that is like, I think that is the question. Like so there's a couple answers to that. One, the best way to do it is to talk to market managers and find out what people are consistently not getting at market that they want to get. And so that ebbs and flows. And one of the things I'll use as an example is microgreens. So what happens every 3 years with microgreens is that they're a very high value crop. And so no one's growing microgreens. And at the same time, everyone will be like, I'm going to grow microgreens. And then we'll have a flooded market of microgreens. And then everyone will be like, this isn't working, and they'll quit. So things do change, and looking for something consistent will require asking a couple more questions. But I would say the cleanest answer to that is going and asking at markets what high value things. And when I say high value things, and I'll touch on this in a second, is that like you can't make a living just growing carrots. The profit margin's not there. Or you could make money being a carrot baron, but again, you'd be abusing the earth and you'd be abusing labor, and it's not what we are training you to do. So you're going to talk to your market managers and find out what's selling. And you're going to also talk to other farmers who grow that thing. So you don't need to be, and you shouldn't be, the only farmer growing something. You want to find partners in farming, and organizations like Sprout and RFC can make those connections for you if you're serious about asking these questions. So say, for instance, I was talking about a cattle farmer earlier where he ended up having to create his own processing facility. Now that he has his own processing facility, I am sure he wants more people who are growing beef, who are raising beef cattle that can come to his processing facility. So he would be an ideal person to talk to and say, hey, what are the gaps in this market? Like, you can't be everyone all at once. Where would you need a teammate, who's running a separate business, but where do you need somebody who's filling in these other gaps? So the other really good thing to look at is, make relationships or start conversations with the avenues that you would want to sell your product through. So I said, go talk to market managers. If there is not a bone in your body that wants to go to farmers markets every week, 2 times a week, 3 times a week, then don't go talk to market managers, because they know what's selling at market. If you want to sell directly wholesale, then we're going to connect you to JV Foods. That's a local food distributor that's doing wholesale distribution. And we're going to say, the guy who runs it, his name is Tim. We're going to say, like, Tim, I've got, this person here. They're really, really serious about farming. They want to know what they can farm. What are people calling you every week for that you just can't keep enough of on the shelf? And there is always an answer. So everybody knows what we're short on. And, right now we are pretty much, we're very woefully represented in meat birds, in chicken and meat chicken right now. So like, if somebody wanted to start a broiler operation and be doing organic pasture, raised chicken right now, I think somebody would make a killing. I also think that and these are not just like my personal opinions, these are like, the things that we're seeing in the market, that there are so few dairy farmers here right now because the price of dairy was, fixed, and there was a kind of a fallout in the bottom of the floor of the dairy market here in Louisiana before organics started happening, or before organics were widely adapted or something people were seeking out in the market. And so we lost our infrastructure for dairy production, and it all went to California, and we have so few dairies here in Louisiana now. And we have really no organic, like grass-fed cow dairy here. And I really think that market is wide open for someone to be doing, ice cream and milk and soap and all that kind of stuff on a reasonable scale. So the folks around you have answers to those questions and are really, really happy to talk to you about it, but also the other people producing things. If they're not down to have that conversation with you, that's because they are coming from not an abundance mindset, because we need more farmers, and they should know that, and they do. Pamela, you asked, I'm very interested in learning more about gardening in this class, or is this class for me, or can you recommend other resources? There is going to be stuff that you absolutely will learn from this series, especially the vegetable production class and the aquaponics class. I would say if you are clear that you are interested in vegetable gardening, this is not the class for you, because this is a one where we're trying to help people decide if they're interested in gardening or farming, and is their passion driving them to do this as a business, or is it keeping them, or is it confusing them? And I will say that there is a Master Gardener home gardening certificate class that LSU is offering right now that's really wonderful, that is probably more tailored to your needs if you are specifically looking to garden. That being said, I do think that there is wonderful vegetable growing tips that you would glean from the vegetable production class, and really awesome stuff that you'll get from the aquaponics class if that's something that's new to you. Great. And then really quickly back to the market research thing, because it is a passion of mine and it's a big gap in our food system. We are trying to find resources to do a comprehensive market research for the area, because it is actually imperative to organizations that assist and develop new farmers that we have quick, clear answers to those questions. So stay tuned, because we really do. I really feel like that's a role that we as organizations are working to fill and should be working to fill. Awesome. Okay, let's jump back in. Share screen. Okay, so we'll roll into our financial considerations. And I want everyone to be thinking about, like, what are the differences in this between farming and gardening? Oh, I got to put it on present mode, don't I? Here we go. Okay, so in order to start a farm, you need upfront capital. It can be as little as, $5,000–7,000, and that is not little, but it is little in the scheme of starting a brick and mortar business, and you can find that capital from loans. You can find it from Kiva loans. You can, do crowdfunding of it through Steward. There are ways to do it that aren't just like being born into money. But you do have to have that upfront capital somehow, and farmers need that and gardeners don't, right? So if that is a huge burden, growing food for if you are wanting to pursue farming because you believe everyone deserves fresh, healthy food, and you believe that your community deserves fresh, healthy food, and you enjoy growing it, but you are daunted by the idea of getting that upfront capital, you can achieve those same goals by being a gardener. Like, you can serve your community and you can be part of a bigger thing, and you can be part of sort of organizing the food system with all of us by being a gardener. And sometimes I actually think gardeners are a lot more powerful in that role, because farmers a lot of the time have to keep their heads down, and gardeners have a lot of room for the kind of softer side of the food system and the organizing and the community building. How much do you need to live on a month? So you need to come up with a real number. So think about, what is your rent or mortgage? What are your personal debts? How much does food cost? How much does healthcare cost? How much does childcare cost? What is your bottom line that you have to feel safe and to be safe? And how long can you go without a profit? So those are two different things. If you are going to take out a big business loan, then you can pay yourself out of that business loan as you're starting that business, because you don't have to have, 7 months of savings or 12 months of savings on top of a capital investment. But you do need to be comfortable with taking on debt. And I personally am always really nervous to encourage people to take on debt, because I think it is such a big deal, and it can be so personally crippling. So you do have to do it if you want to make capital investments in a farm, or you can find, again, there are always exceptions. Rules are made because of exceptions, but for the most part, that is the way that you're going to go. And so you should enter the process of taking on debt very, very meaningfully. And then that thing that I was talking about, what are the hacks? What are the ways that people are making this work? Partners' income or personal savings. So if you have, a partner who's working an off-farm job that pays enough that you are able to, work towards being in the black or work towards breaking even, then that can be a real game changer with starting a farm, especially if you're able to move to somewhere where the cost of living is a little bit lower. And I think this is an ideal moment where people are working remotely, that maybe, a partner or spouse's job that did require someone to be in a city. Maybe it doesn't require them to be in the heart of New Orleans anymore. Maybe they can be somewhere where the cost of land is a little bit lower, and that could be a real game changer for starting a farm. So physical and schedule considerations. Oh, I changed it to mental health on the second slide because that's what I mean. Your body will get beat up, and you can do that better or worse by learning how to move and how to be ergonomic on the farm. But even at your best, farming is hard on your body. Any physical activity is going to be hard on your body. Gardening is hard on your body. But there is a big difference between waking up and not being able to stand up straight because you pulled something in your back the day before. If you have to go out and harvest and it's raining, that can be like a real straw that broke the camel's back. Whereas if you wake up as a gardener and your back hurts, then your garden's just not going to get weeded that day. And so I really want people to prioritize their physical and mental health in all aspects of their lives, including employment, especially maybe employment. And so think about the fact that your body is your instrument, and it's not the easiest job on your body. Vacations will be different, right? At least for a while. So, I am not a person who's like always going on vacation, but having animals or crops that you have to water really changes that if you are. And so even if you like to go on a once a year vacation or once every other year vacation, you will have to schedule your whole life around that. And so I like people to consider that, because you can't go on a weekend, overnight camping trip up to Tunica. You have to really plan what's going to happen next in your life around the farm. Your schedule will be crazy. Work-life balance, which is something that we want everyone to have, won't be a thing, at least for a little while, because farming is very much an all-consuming job. And then this is something I like to point out to people, is that you will become less precious with the things that you are doing on your farm. You'll become less precious about gardening. And I think there's a great power in that, and there's something really cool about that. But also if the sort of delicate and precious nature of gardening, the sort of fascination with gardening is what draws you to it, you don't want to lose that. And what I mean by becoming less precious is that, if you grow one really beautiful watermelon, you're going to like pet your watermelon and like talk to your watermelon. And, it's like this prize that you have grown. And if you grow 5 acres of watermelon, at some point you're going to want to throw the watermelon. You don't want to see the watermelon anymore. And when the season's over, there might be some watermelons on there that are about to, ripen, but you're like, nope, we're composting the whole vine. So if the like tender side of gardening is what you really like, then you should kind of factor that in, because when you're running a farm as a business, there isn't as much room for that kind of particularity. And personally, I've liked that change. I like being a lot more like it. I kind of like working with the seasons in that way more, because I've learned to say, like, as long as something gets composted and goes back into being soil, like that is it being part of a system. But I also have seen, when I'm deadheading flowers, people will come behind me and pick them up, and I'm like, they're brown, they're wilting, they're not even good anymore. So, takes all types. I don't want to read us through this whole schedule, but I did want to just kind of, this was actually my schedule in 2017. I wrote it down one week to see what I was doing. And so it was a Monday through Sunday schedule. And so you can see on Sunday, I did schedule rest. And in that, Sunday was like a day where you just really had to like putz around and check on a couple of things. But the reality of, being like full-time farming is that you are on a lot of the time. And what's not represented here is that sometimes you're woken up in the middle of the night too. And this is a way to run a farm. This is not the way to run a farm. It is a way to run a farm, but it is the way that you will at least kind of be initiated into as you are starting running a diversified vegetable operation. And so does a beekeeping operation look like this? No. Does a goat farm look like this? No. But if you're considering doing full production of vegetables and going to market, this is a pretty standard beginner schedule. And then you start honing and cutting and deciding. We had a farmer call us the other day and say, I'm not going to do this thing anymore. I'm not going to be part of this opportunity anymore because it means that I don't have a weekend day. And so you get to the point where you start understanding where to cut. So this is not an ideal schedule, nor is it a sustainable one, but it is the reality of some weeks on a farm. So I want people to kind of sit with that a little bit. So just some important questions, and I'm going to blow through them a little bit so that we can have more questions at the end if we want, but you need to think about what you want to grow. I said it earlier, you can't make a living selling carrots. Your profit margin on carrots is always going to be too low. Remember that exercise I did with the chickens? We're at 10%. So even if you can get to 20%, which is like pristine profit margin, your carrots, everybody's buying your carrots, and they're these beautiful purple carrots, so you can charge a ton of money for them. And, every single one of them sells out, you still are going to have to sell like 1 million carrots. So talk to market managers, other farmers, market shoppers. Don't just talk to anyone. Don't say, if you were to go to a farmer's market and buy a product, what would you buy? Say, do you go to a farmer's market? And then there is a component of this. So this comes into, and who do you want to grow it for? So we don't want to look at a market community and what they want and say, that's who's going to market forever, and that's the only people that we're catering to. There are communities that are completely not able to find their way into food access of local food, right? There are so many barriers to entry at farmers markets. There are so many ways in which that space might not feel safe to everyone. Everyone knows that there is sort of there's like a stereotype of like farmers markets being like very bougie. And so you don't want to just say, I'm going to cater the entire idea of my business to the people that are already accessing these things. So who do you want to grow it for? And I love the idea of like developing your business plan around the community that you're part of or that you want to serve or whatever that is for you. But this comes back to whether you want to be a gardener or a farmer. Food access and politics and the environment and food sovereignty is so much for one small business to hold all at once. And there will be times where you will have to protect your own brain space and your own, family, and just say like, we have to pay the bills. And so I can't kind of hold every single thing about my job at the same time and work 50 hours a week. So I think there is a lot more space for tenderness and activism and love in the gardening community. And that being said, there are some really radical things happening on farms, and there are some amazing food access things happening on farms. So just bringing that in to the consideration that like you may have an ideology that drives you to farm, and that is, I have that, but also you can't be everyone at once. So create some space for yourself. Where do you want to grow? So do you currently have access to land? And that can mean you have the land, or it can mean you understand how to get the land, or, maybe someone's got to die and you'll get land. I don't know. That's what happens a lot. But is it secure land access, right? So, are you able to actually stay on that land? Are you able to invest in it? Are you comfortable investing in land that's not secure? So that is something that people often say at the beginning of 5 years. They're like, it's fine, I'll build a packing shed on this land. I'm going to be here for 5 years. 5 years moves like that. And at the end of 5 years, when you're packing up and you're being hustled out of your garden, you're going to look back on that packing shed and be like, that was $5,000 that's now on, you know, someone else's land. So just thinking about what you're comfortable with losing and what you're comfortable in investing in. And, you know, there are a lot of models of farming that are sold to folks where they say use all movable infrastructure. And I've seen that work for a lot of people, but I also think there's a great power in people being able to own and invest in land for the production of food and feeling safe on it and being able to take back a piece of, you know, our history of food production in this country. And so I do really encourage people to have safe tenure on land, whatever that looks like. That could be any kind of agreement. It doesn't have to just be ownership. And then in the search for that land, you need to know if the soil and the water and the access to markets are good. Like, can you get the food to market? There are a million farmer Facebook groups, and you should join all of them if this is what you want to do, because they're both hilarious and helpful. There was someone selling the most beautiful flower farm I've ever seen the other day on Facebook for like $50,000. I was like, what's going on here? And I looked at it on Google Earth and I zoomed out over and over again, and it was in the middle of just nothing but corn in the middle of nowhere in Iowa. It was this tiny green, diverse, like biodiverse oasis right there in the center of this, I mean, hundreds of miles of just corn and wheat. And so I was like, oh, that's what's going on. You know, someone tried to start an organic farm right there in the middle of all of this GMO corn that's probably getting sprayed all the time. So just really think about what's going on around the land that you're on, whether you're a gardener or a farmer, and take that into account as you plan your next step. If you have a tiny space, very few things are going to be profitable. Really look at those numbers before taking a leap. And then this, I think, is my last slide, which is who do you want to grow with? So there are all these harsh things and all these business things that I've said this whole time, but really the idea of growing food and feeding your community, growing flowers, growing beautiful things is just such a noble pursuit. And it really brings people together. And it's just one of the most lovely, I'm tearing up. It's one of the most lovely things that any of us can get to do with our days. But you can't run a farm alone. So the ultimate hack for running a farm is other people and its community. And it is coming from that abundance mindset that I talked about. You need to identify partners who have the same vision for what they want a farm to be, the same, mostly ideology. Like, you don't want to surround yourself with all of the same people, but you want to know what you believe in before starting a business that feeds people together. What your financial needs are, and what the work ethic that you bring to a business are. So, you know, it can feel kind of daunting to look at the state of farming for profit in America and be like, okay, so let me get this right. You basically can only do it if you're like, you like inherit land, or you're born with a bunch of money, or, you know, you're going to take out a bunch of debt and all this stuff. And it can feel really tiring, especially, you know, seeing the same success stories over and over again, and seeing all of the people who can't access those same success stories, or being a person that can't access that same success story. And one of the most heartening things I've seen over the past 10 years in farming is that there are people who are working together to create models of farm ownership that are employee owned, that are cooperatively owned. And instead of saying this has to be a micro farm that I run alone, they're actually saying, like, what if we could run a sizable farm that treats people right and treats the earth right, and is solvent together. And so I just recently have been really heartened by seeing an uptick in people doing farming together. And I will tell you, farming alone, even if you're an introvert, is very, very difficult. So considering, you know, if you want to go into business as a farmer, bring people into that fold with you and think about sharing that, the joys and the burdens of that. And if you are a gardener and you are gardening alone, I also encourage you to garden with people, because it is one of the most joyful parts of the experience. And you can be quiet and garden with people too. You can just garden shoulder to shoulder, or 6 feet apart, but someday you will garden shoulder to shoulder again. Oh, and I will say, see, that is my husband right there, and that is a market table that we used to run, and he decided he wanted to be a gardener. So I think about this process a lot, and he was like, I don't want to work this much. I want to be a gardener. But we met busting it on a farm. So he is definitely an inspiration in me understanding that not everything that you do as a passion has to be monetized. I think I had that somewhere in a slide, but they often are like, do what you love and you won't work a single day in your life. And I think that that is not true. I think sometimes if you do what you love as a job, you take a little joy away from it. And so I think that you can, the good sides of it are huge. Getting to do what you love as your job is amazing. And also it does mean that it's no longer your hobby. So think about what works best for you and then move forward with that decision. And we can build a truly sustainable food system for both people and the earth. And we're only going to do that together as gardeners and farmers. So that's my kumbaya moment. And I will switch back to stop sharing, and we'll see if we have any questions here. So yeah, y'all can bring questions into the chat, and I might actually call on you to ask them now that we have 10 minutes. Let me see what I already have. So Devin, I think, asked a follow-up question from when I was talking about the market research, and I said the area. When I say the area about market research, our food system, our food shed actually extends into Mississippi. So whenever I'm talking about like what selling or buying food is like in New Orleans, there's actually this invisible web of people who are producing food from 5 hours away. And so when I say the area, I mean the market for the area, because the urban center is where the most money is being spent on food. But that is not to say that that's the market you should be pursuing, right? That's the creativity of your own personal marketing, is like, you don't have to follow the trend that New Orleans wants to follow. You can say like, who is serving, I'm saying it, who's in Eunice? Like, who is doing a CSA box in Eunice? Is there a demand for a CSA box in Eunice? Then do a CSA box in Eunice if you can prove there's a demand for it. But when I'm talking about trying to do consolidated market research for the area, I do actually mean the food system of our region, which would be southeast to southwest Louisiana and over into Mississippi a little bit as well. What if I want to mostly to farm for me and my family and be able to sell a little food to my neighborhood? I want to make a little money to cover seeds, water, electric, and tools. I don't care if I make a lot more than that. About 10K a year would be great. Does this work? Is it farming? So the question of like, does it work and is it farming is interesting, because I think the distinction is sort of, there isn't a legal distinction, right? And so it's sort of arbitrary. And in this talk, what I was sort of dividing is like, do you want to do this for profit, or do you want to do this for passion and for a hobby? And there are absolutely ways to break even on doing it as a hobby. And it brings up that labor piece, which is, can you make back $10,000 a year on selling a product? Absolutely, 100%. Could that make you break even on what you put into growing that product? Probably. Depends on like how you're kind of factoring in your startup costs and what that product is. But I think that the idea of making, I think where we get into it is, what does making $10,000 mean? And you need to think about what making $10,000 means to you, right? Is the labor of doing the activity so fun for you that you would be doing that anyway, so you might as well find a way to monetize it? Then absolutely. But if you would be using that as leisure time and it is stressing you out and you conceive of it as income, then that might not be the same as making $10,000. So it really has a lot more to do with your priorities than hard and fast math, because, you know, going back to those chickens or going back to, you know, a market table. So if you wanted to make $10,000 a year, and again, is make profit or is make, you know, the entire amount that's coming in. So if we want to say just bringing in $10,000 regardless of the cost of goods sold, then let's say that's, sorry, my dog is going ham down there. She's found a toy and is making really funny noises. So let's say you're going to market. So that means you need to go to market every week, or you need to sell $200 of stuff from your house about every week, right? And if we're saying that that is just pure, you're not worried about what the cost of doing that, what the labor of doing that, the supplies of doing that were, then is $200 a week of sales reasonable to do from your house? Absolutely. Like, you could have a text chain with your neighbors, or you could just go knock doors with your neighbors, and you could sell, you know, eggs and flowers and honey, $200 a week, easy peasy. You need to remember that the work of doing that every week to make $200 a week is real work. You will be out there knocking the door. You will get a text in the middle of the night that's like, hey, do you have eggs? And I think that that's joyful work. And so, and I think it's valid work, and I think it's fun, and I think it's community building. So, you know, that I guess there's not one simple answer. You could bring in $10,000 a year selling food to your neighbors. It would not be a $10,000 profit. I hope that was clear. Do we have any other questions? I'm very long-winded with my answers, so. Great. Last time that I was like, oh, we don't have any questions, they came in right as I said that, so I'm okay. So you all absorbed a lot of information about hard farming realities tonight. I am like, that's why when we do beginning farmer and rancher trainings, if 5% of the people become full-time farmers, that is like an achievement. And if 95% of the people are like really amazing gardeners, are like really, really amazing gardeners, and they're having a great time, and they're feeding their families, and they're feeding their neighbors, and they feel really connected to their local food system, then that is like amazing, and we've totally achieved the goal. So farming full-time is not for everyone, and that does not mean that that's the valid pursuit that we're trying to train everyone into. Actually, helping people find their place is the idea. And there is going to be plenty of stuff in these classes for gardeners to learn, especially, like I said, in that vegetable production series, as well as that aquaponics series. We will have like a pretty serious like business licenses and legal issues course as well, which could be helpful if you're looking to run a community garden, or to secure access to land as a gardener even. So I really do think that there is a lot of stuff in these classes that'll check the boxes for everyone. And then we also have those on-farm days that we'll be really excited to see people out at and get our hands dirty with people again. It has been, 6 months since we've been able to have new people come out and learn on the farm with us at Sprout. I think RFC has had a couple more opportunities to do that. So we're looking forward to seeing you. We got Bruce and Karen. Are we already registered to receive the next Zoom invites, or do we need to sign up for each meeting? The answer is we have an RFC. Sophie, chime in if I say this wrong, but we have your email addresses from the time that we sent you this link. And so you will get your future links in the same way that you got this link. When you signed up for that Eventbrite, you signed up for the series. Yeah, I think that's it. Great. Awesome, guys. Well, reach out to us if you need anything in between. I'm Margie at sproutnola.org, and Sophie is, or does anyone from RFC want to say how to get in touch with them, or if they want to get in touch, if anyone wants to get in touch?
Sure. So Sophie Miller is smiller@sproutnola.org. at recirculatingfarms.org, and our website is recirculatingfarms.org.
Oh, Erin's watching the full moon rise right now. See, oh, everyone go out and look at the full moon and never lose the joy of gardening. It brings us all together. Have a great night, everyone. Happy Harvest Moon.